All right, let's dive right into this explainer and see exactly how the biggest conflict in human history unfolded. We're going to break down the sheer madness of World War II. But, to keep things focused and actually easy to digest, we're doing it oversimplified style. So get ready for some fast-paced, chaotic energy to help us grasp how this whole global disaster actually happened. So basically, the world was already a giant mess, right? Europe was completely broken after the First World War. You had nations constantly arguing, borders being contested, and just this deep, deep resentment brewing among exhausted, hungry populations. The world didn't just stumble into a Second World War out of nowhere. It was already a simmering powder keg. A lot of that anger started right here, at the Treaty of Versailles back in 1919. The victorious nations were so desperate to avoid a repeat of the war that they made the terms of this treaty incredibly punitive. It essentially left Germany destitute. German combatants felt deeply betrayed by this armistice, and that shared sense of humiliation, well, that became a very dangerous psychological breeding ground. And that political humiliation trickled right down to everyday life. The economic downturns and hyperinflation hit Germany incredibly hard. I mean, when your money becomes so worthless that you literally have to bring a wheelbarrow full of cash just to buy a single loaf of bread, citizens become desperate. And desperate people become very, very open to extreme political ideas that promise to fix everything. The stepping stones to total disaster were laid out pretty fast. We start with the Versailles Treaty in 1918, then that massive hyperinflation in 23, and just when things maybe looked like they might stabilize, bam, the global crash of 1929 exposes the ultimate fragility of the Weimar Republic. This sequence of poverty, paired with the rise of extreme political players, most notably Adolf Hitler, really set the stage. By 1939, when the Nazi-Soviet Pact was signed to carve up Eastern Europe, the fuse was officially lit. Section 1. Germany speedruns Europe. The Blitzkrieg begins. So, Germany started speedrunning Europe. They didn't just invade, they launched this massive rapid strategy known as Blitzkrieg, lightning war. They utilized tightly coordinated tanks, motorized infantry, and aircraft to just completely overwhelm their opponents before they even knew what hit them. And it happened so fast, literally like watching a massive combo meter fill up. Step 1, they steamroll through Poland in September 1939. Step 2, they sweep up north into Denmark and Norway. Step 3, by mid-1940, they push right through Belgium and the Netherlands, forcing the absolutely stunning fall of France. In less than a year, the map of Western Europe was completely redrawn. So France falls, and suddenly the British Empire is standing completely alone against the Axis powers in Europe. Despite enduring the relentless, terrifying aerial warfare of the Blitz, where German bombers were just pounding their cities, Britain simply refused to surrender. They basically looked around the empty room and said, well, guess I'll fight everyone then. Moving right along to Section 2, the chat gets crowded, the conflict goes global. At this point, the war violently splits into two massive, chaotic new arenas. On one side, you've got these freezing, brutal land invasions on the Eastern Front, heavily relying on infantry and tanks. On the other side, there's this explosive naval and aerial warfare expanding rapidly across the Pacific Ocean. The scale of this conflict is now officially off the charts. In June 1941, Hitler actually breaks his pact with Stalin and invades the Soviet Union in Operation Barbarossa. Germany speedruns deep into Soviet territory, but then, they hit the freezing Russian winter. The brutal conditions, combined with an incredibly fierce and massive Soviet resistance, violently halts the German advance, leading to some of the absolute bloodiest fighting in human history. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, on December 7, 1941, Japan dramatically attacks American territories, including that infamous surprise strike on the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. Overnight, America has entered the chat, pulling the immense economic and industrial powerhouse of the United States directly into the fight. With the U.S. joining the Allies, we are now looking at total war. And what does that mean? It means it's not just armies fighting anymore, it's entire populations. Nations are mobilizing all their resources. Factories are converted literally overnight to build bombers and tanks. And women enter the industrial workforce in massive numbers to keep that war engine running. Everyone, everywhere is part of the effort. Which brings us to Section 3, the turning tides, the Axis advance stalls. Over in the Pacific, the momentum absolutely slams into a brick wall at the Battle of Midway in June 1942. Thanks to some brilliant code breaking, the US intercepts the Japanese fleet and cripples their navy, sinking 4 massive aircraft carriers. Boom! It is a devastating, irreversible loss of naval power that completely halts Japan's expansion and shifts the dynamic in the Pacific right back toward the Allies. And over in Europe and Africa, the dominoes are starting to fall the other way too. The Soviets pull off a brutal, decisive victory at Stalingrad in 1943. The Axis forces are pushed entirely out of North Africa. The Allies invade Italy, collapsing the fascist regime there. And then, the massive climax. D-Day in June 1944. The Western Allies storm the beaches of Normandy, squeezing Germany from both sides in a relentless push toward Berlin. All right, our final chapter, Section 4, History Changed Forever, The Final Surrenders. By April 1945, Soviet forces completely encircle Berlin, leading to Hitler's death and Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8th. But the Pacific War, that rages on until August, when the United States drops newly developed, totally devastating atomic weapons on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Faced with unprecedented destruction and a Soviet invasion of Manchuria, Japan unconditionally surrenders on September 2nd. The war was finally over, but the cost was absolutely staggering. We're talking 60 to 75 million lives. This isn't just a statistic. It represents global devastation, massive military and civilian casualties, and the millions of innocent people who were systematically murdered in the Holocaust. The whole fast-paced chaos kind of stops being funny when we realize the true gravity of what humanity just did to itself. Now, the immediate aftermath completely shaped the modern world we live in today. The globe kind of calms down, but the borders are entirely redrawn. The devastation of European powers triggers the decolonization of Asia and Africa. The United Nations is created in this desperate bid to prevent this from ever happening again. And finally, the US and the Soviet Union emerge from the rubble as rival nuclear-armed superpowers, instantly kicking off the Cold War. World War II changed the trajectory of human history forever, for sure. But as we reflect on that unprecedented destruction, the crazy speed of the escalation, and those 75 million lives lost, have we actually learned the lessons needed to stop history from repeating itself? Really think about that as you look at our world today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history around you.